in what respects do you think our hunter-gatherers would have cold plunge? Like, I can't imagine they did it for the same reasons we are. Like, I can't imagine our hunter-gatherers as biohackers, but maybe they were inherent biohackers where they went in the water, bathed in it, thought it was good. What do you think?
They didn't have to hack anything.
Yeah.
You know, it was all there for them. They didn't have like heated leather seats and central air conditioning and things like that. Things just happened to them because that was the environment that they lived in. But it's a really interesting question. Why are our bodies, why do we respond so well to cold plunge therapy? And there are sort of ancestral origins of what happens to our body. It requires some thought. There's something, it's kind of a misnomer, but it's called the Aquatic Ape Hypothesis. It has other names, and I should probably refer to it by other names, but it's this idea that human beings lived at the water's edge. And there's a lot of evidence for it. Mm-hmm. The Aquatic Ape Hypothesis meant to explain these strange anatomical features of the human being. We share like 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees or bonobos. They're very close relatives in like a metaphorical sense. Why do our nostrils point down and theirs point out? Why are we practically hairless and they're covered with fur? There are good reasons for this, because when we dive into the water, downward facing nostrils keeps the water from going up our nose. Because we are aquatic creatures. Why do we have subcutaneous fat, that is fat right below our skin, and fairly high body fat composition compared to a chimpanzee or a bonobo, which is like in the mid-single digits typically?
Wow.
We are built to be in the water. In some cases, we have more in common with dolphins or whales or the manatee, with these aquatic mammals, than we have in these certain inexplicable anatomical features with chimpanzees. So this Aquatic Ape Hypothesis, it's meant to explain why we have the anatomical features of aquatic mammals rather than land-based mammals. Here's the biggest, most important one. Our brains are larger, and it takes a lot of DHA is a good example. It takes a lot of these omega-3 fatty acids to make a big brain like human beings have. Where are you going to get that? You get it from the water. You get it from the fish. You get it from the shellfish. You get it from foraging in the water. The hunter-gatherer that we have like sort of in our mind is maybe, you know, in the Kalahari Desert, and they run down the antelope or the wildebeest or something like that. Because those are the societies that the anthropologists go to if they want to study, you know, human beings in hunter-gatherer, nomadic lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But that's not the way it started out. You could say, well, the oldest fossils of human beings are found in East Africa. East Africa is on the equator. You know, it's really hot in East Africa. How the heck could we be so cold adapted? And then remember, where does Wim Hof take his trainees? Up Mount Kilimanjaro. Where's Mount Kilimanjaro?
It's in
East Africa. It's right on the equator. Like during the Ice Age, the East Africa was covered with ice because of the mountains there. The human beings, and there weren't a lot of them, let's say 12, 15,000 years ago, Ice Age, there were maybe 10,000 human beings. It's called a population bottleneck. And they were all stuck between the glacier and the ocean. The waters that they foraged in were cold because they were melting off the glaciers in the mountain. Nobody who couldn't adapt to the cold water survived the Ice Age. And you say, yeah, but it's been 10,000 years of evolution, right? Like, what do we really have in common with our ancient ancestors besides, you know, 10 fingers and 10 toes? And the answer is, we have mitochondria in common.
My answer is everything.
Right? I mean, we're anatomically not that different than the human beings that were here, you know, in the genesis of time. If you believe in the Garden of Eden, you know, then the waters that Adam and Eve bathed in were cold. And we have a lot in common with them. Not necessarily in our nucleic DNA, but in our mitochondrial DNA. Nobody explained to me in freshman biology that mitochondria have their own DNA, and you inherit it exclusively from your mother. That means there's no sexual reproduction of mitochondrial DNA. That means that I have the same mitochondrial DNA as my great, 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 great grandmother did? Now, there are mutations, and so there are certain haplotypes. But because the mitochondrial DNA evolved much more slowly than the DNA in the nucleus, we have a hell of a lot more in common metabolically with the ancestors that survived the Ice Age than we might think. Our bodies are built to expect cold water immersion. And if you don't get it, it's no wonder you lapse into a state of disease. Cold water is like sunshine and exercise. It's what your body is built for. You got to give your body the things that it's built for. And you could say, well, all that sounds a bit far-fetched. And then I got to ask you this. Why are human babies born with an instinct to swim and not walk? Because you've seen National Geographic, and the baby giraffe like falls out of its mother and then is running around in the grass like 2 minutes later. They have an instinct to run, to trot. Like for us it would be walking. But babies don't know how to do that. It takes months for them to learn how to even crawl, right? And after that, tentative steps. Maybe they're a year old. But human babies are born with an instinct to swim.
Yeah.
Why would that be? Because they were born in the cold water. Because our ancient grandmothers would seek out the relief of a water birth. And when that baby comes out in the water, it's going to find its way up to the surface. That's how it stayed alive. We are aquatic creatures. We're just so far from the water, which is really our origin. Yeah, the hunting and the gathering is important because we needed those food sources back then. But it's the human birthing in the water that I think really goes to like our deepest, most instinctive responses.
Born in the cold. This was a clip from my podcast, the Cold Plunge Podcast. If you want to see more clips like this, be sure to subscribe on all major podcast platforms. And check out the links in the description of this video for more.